ASEAN Breakfast Call. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, good morning. This is Gowri.
Hey, you're listening to Durian ASEAN and of course, more news from Southeast Asia. So, how's your weekend?
My weekend was a little crazy because I had the show going on from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so it was just rehearsal, and there was no weekend really. It was still work and we're back to work again today, so I probably need to wait for next weekend to happen.
Oh, Gowri, you're so hardworking. I like you for that.
Well, it's the passion for arts, really.
Mm-hmm. For me, my weekend was actually quite nice. I went to this Myanmar Muslim refugee community near the area of Selayang in Kuala Lumpur, and I was amazed how huge the community was and how much neglected they were by the government, by society. So it was an eye opener.
Were there activities or was it just like an awareness?
It was a video screening by a local filmmaker, and he was interviewed by us. His name is Jules Ong. You can check out his documentary about this Myanmar Muslim refugee community at Al Jazeera Viewfinder. And moving on to our news. So, to talk about the news today, you cannot not talk about Malaysia news. It's a lot of, I would say it's a carnival Malaysian news. First off, is about the fatwa against Sister in Islam. As we all know, Sister in Islam last week held a press conference to challenge the fatwa by the Kelantan government. And with that, they got a bit retaliation by Azmin Ali, which is the current Menteri Besar of Selangor. He said that Sister in Islam should respect the fatwa. And this is actually a fatwa by some quarters that say that the Sisters in Islam shouldn't be called an Islamic group because they promote liberalism and pluralism.
Right, and Azmin Ali, who is also from your constituency, I believe, which is Gombak, he also declined to answer any further questions on the matter provided. But the issue came to light yesterday when they filed for this judicial review on a related fatwa, saying that it does not explain what the terms liberalism and pluralism mean and what constitutes going against the teachings of Islam. And they just wanted to clarify these two terms and to come up with a more elaborate explanation as to what does it really mean when you accuse someone of going against the teaching of Islam. But that apparently did not resonate well with our Menteri Besar here.
The irony part is, in Indonesia, the word pluralism is actually the core principle by all religious groups. This is because Indonesia, like Malaysia, is ethnically plural and religiously as well. So for them to be able to live together and to accept that each of them are different and they should celebrate these differences is to uphold the word pluralism.
And also, according to this fatwa that was gazetted on July 31st this year under Section 111 of the Islamic Administration Enactment, any publication that is deemed liberal or plural can be actually banned and seized by the authorities. And also, it goes for social media that goes against the teachings of Islam, which can be blocked by the MCMC, which is Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission.
What is liberal and plural according to the Malaysian government? They never really explain about it. So probably anything that is against the mainstream idea of Islam is considered liberal and plural.
Yes, it goes against the discretion of the authorities, and there is no specific definition, which is what Sisters in Islam were trying to lobby for, but then they were seen as not so Islamic anymore.
The fatwa is one thing, by the Selangor e-fatwa, but the fact that Selangor Menteri Besar Azmin Ali felt to compel to voice out the need to this fatwa to be respected is somehow a negative feedback. I wouldn't imagine Tan Sri Khalid Ibrahim to act like that. So it shows that Azmin Ali might have a different agenda when it comes to religion. But Azmin Ali aside, the word liberalism and pluralism, what does it resonate to you?
For me, it is about respecting the differences that exist among us Malaysians, because it's undeniable that we have a very diverse community in Malaysia. We have different races, not just the three main races, of course. We have so many others. We have so many religions that's being practiced here. And as it was promised that everyone can actually practice their religion according to their own discretion, but of course within certain limitations and all. But when it comes to liberalism and I knew this was gonna happen, and pluralism, and it's something that is very complicated in the sense that this is eventually a Muslim country.
But Indonesia is a Muslim country. I'm not sure how much they embrace liberalism. Probably economic liberalism, they might be embracing it right now since their economy is in a slowdown. But when it comes to pluralism, it's definitely one of the core tenets of what being an Indonesian is all about. It is dumbfounding. We can be a neighbor to Singapore, to Indonesia, and to some extent to Philippines, but we can't accept the fact that this word liberalism and pluralism has nothing to do with against Islam. It's more about trying to have a better interpretation about living in a multicultural society. You cannot avoid by realizing Islam is not the only religion that is followed by people in Malaysia.
But we also have a response from our sisters in Islam, actually, when they replied to Azmin Ali's comments.
Yeah, and the response seems to be like I say very calm in a way. And this is what Zainal Anwar said. The Jekyll and Hyde charade the government plays for different audiences in different locations and at different times will eventually fall apart, for there is a runaway train heading towards a crash, said by Zainal Anwar. Not something that is, I would say, probably people who are pro-Islamist would accept that.
And they also requested for Azmin Ali to actually they asked him what does he even mean by respecting the fatwa, and they also requested for him to enlighten them on the definition of liberalism and a pluralism. This was said by Suri Kempe, actually, who is the program manager when she was contacted.
Interesting fact. So Malaysia definitely is heading towards a territory that is trying to narrow down the definition of what Islam is all about. At another side of the world, there's also another problem with Islam, but this time is with Myanmar. And Myanmar government definitely have problem with the identity of the Rohingya Muslim. Hence, the UN resolution urges Myanmar to drop identity plan.
And we have been waiting very long for UN to actually step in and do something about this.
To respond to this, right?
And they have been oppressed for so long. There's so many news about how badly they're being treated. And finally, the UN actually steps in and tells Myanmar that they cannot come up with their plan for the citizenship, with just some term that they feel is suitable for these Rohingyas, and try to coerce it on their people.
We actually covered it quite a few months ago when they were doing the census for all the ethnic groups in Myanmar. Apparently, only the Rohingya were considered as Bengali, and under the Bengali section they are being considered as foreigners or illegal immigrants rather than being part of the Myanmar citizenship.
But even then, what UN did was just to express their serious concern, so to say, to Myanmar, and they also called for the government to allow freedom of movement and equal access to full citizenship for the Rohingya minority, and most importantly, to allow self-identification according to what they really are and not what the government think they should be.
And Rohingya Muslim are not that little, considering that it's not just Rohingya, they are the ones who are Muslim, but there are other Myanmar Muslim as well. But if you just want to count the Rohingya Muslim, there are around 1.3 million people. And this is a sensitive issue in Myanmar because, as we all know, Myanmar is a predominantly Buddhist state and tries to move away from decades of repressive military rule towards democracy. But the funny thing is, whenever I meet people trying to explain the situation in Myanmar and trying to somehow link the connection to Malaysia, this is one quote that I really enjoy explaining this. I would say that in Malaysia, we have Ketuanan Melayu, but in Myanmar, although it's a bit extreme, they have Ketuanan Buddhist. And that explains it all when race and religion becomes the state ideology, and it's naturally they would exclude those who are not part of that ideological framework, and they would definitely create an enemy to somehow justify why that ideology need to be defended.
And also, we are actually moving towards our, of course, ASEAN 2015, which everyone's looking forward to, and issues like this, of course, needs to be dealt with immediately because when it comes to the ASEAN 2015, it's a lot more on the bigger picture, and a grassroots problem like this, it's good that UN stepped in and came up with all these steps, but they should, of course, follow through with it and see that Myanmar really allows for self-identification and not just say, okay, you guys should do this and then just let it be, and there's no follow through, no one to follow up and make sure it really happens.
So last week, Myanmar's ambassador to the UN, Tim Cho, told the General Assembly Human Rights Committee that his country is not targeting a religion. He warned that insisting on the rights to self-identification will only impose obstacles to finding a lasting solution to ethnic tension. It seems like they are definitely defending, even though it doesn't make sense to any of us, why they need to defend this particular identity plan.
He apparently has some other solution to this problem, which we don't know what it is yet, but he is not in support of the self-identification, apparently.
So UN definitely need to press much more harder, especially if they want to take the transition towards democracy for Myanmar seriously, because when countries are investing in Myanmar, they need to feel that there is some form of stability, and if the government keeps on trying to create tension between the Muslim and the Buddhists in Myanmar, it will only be a loss for the Myanmar government.
And we don't know if this is going to be possible in the near future, but all we can do is hope for the best for the Rohingyas in Myanmar.
And another campaign for democracy in the US. So US should start with Malaysia when it comes to trying to promote this idea of democracy. Of course, it can start with Myanmar, but the US seem to be very silent with the situation in Malaysia. Malaysia is one of the key trade partner, diplomatic partner in Southeast Asia. In fact, we have one of the strongest relationship with the US, besides, of course, Singapore, in the region of Southeast Asia. So at the UN itself in September, President Obama, citing relentless crackdown against the world against dissent and civil society, promised an even stronger campaign to defend democracy. But they should focus on Malaysia first, isn't it?
They are actually saying that they should focus in Malaysia because probably in the eye of the world, Malaysia is the country that has the most problems, I would say, in terms of economic for the people. And they've also listed down all the problems that they think Malaysia is facing right now, which shows that they are really observing what's going on in this country. Because, like you mentioned, we are one of the trade partners. We do have a very good relationship for decades, and in order to keep that relationship going, they are looking to actually step in and resolve some of the issues that we are facing here. But would that actually be a good idea, or how would Malaysians feel about it? How would our prime ministers or other ministers feel about it in general?
Mm-hmm. I don't know, but if you're talking about President Obama, he said that even when it was uncomfortable and or causes friction, Obama pledged that his administration would step up to defend persecuted activists, and I think he meant the ones that were persecuted under the sedition law, and oppose efforts by foreign governments to restrict freedoms of peaceful assembly and association and expression. Nevertheless, so far they haven't seen much follow-up on that promise, but the opportunity to do so are abundant. One of the most urgent lies in Malaysia, which is the key U.S. ally. Since last month, extraordinary crackdown on opposition leaders, academicians, and journalists.
It is interesting that Obama actually, or his administration, noticed that our Prime Minister Najib actually promised to repeal the law back in 2012. So we're not the only ones who remember that. There are also people all the way from across the world who knew that he made that promise and that he failed to follow through with it. And some of the things that they brought up was also the odious criminal case against Anwar Ibrahim, which is also ongoing now, and we are about to find out the verdict pretty soon.
There's also another piece of law and that derived from the colonial era, the criminal case against Anwar Ibrahim. And as the leader of the opposition leader, Anwar was just a bit of history. Anwar was charged in 2008 for homosexual sodomy, which Malaysia shamefully still treat it as a crime. And this is not an Islamic crime. It's actually a crime under the civil law, which is, as I mentioned earlier, part of the colonial era law. And though Anwar Ibrahim, as we all know, had denied all the charges and was acquitted in 2012 trial, and appeals court this year reversed the verdict and handed him a 5-year prison sentence. This week, his final appeal is being heard by Malaysia's highest court. If Anwar loses, he will be imprisoned and banned from politics forever, since he's already 67. Another 5 years, he will be in his 70s, and that would be too old for him to run for office anymore.
And another thing that they brought up was also gerrymandering, which is practiced in Malaysia, and he noted that his ruling party actually lost the popular vote in a general election for the first time. And apart from that, by actually cracking down on the opposition, based on this article, it says that he's actually making extremist options more attractive to Malaysians. And as we all know, we had the news of people seeking for political asylum in the US now, and there's also the case of brain drain where everyone is just trying to leave the country. But there are, of course, people who are still here, who still wants to fight for what they think is right, what they think Malaysia should really be. But there's also the risk that some people may just give up and leave. But then again, that's probably what they want these people to do as well.
Yeah, most probably. Another area that gerrymandering is good because it's definitely preserving the establishment rule. But gerrymandering, just to put things in perspective, it's not really just a Malaysia problem. It is also a US problem. That's the reason why certain areas in the US has always been pro certain political parties, and the others will also be the same way, because they already make it so that majority of the population on that area would support that particular political party. And Malaysia is definitely heading towards heading towards a narrow step towards the idea of Islamic State, because Malaysia haven't been really quite strong to push against Malaysian from joining Islamic State, even though maybe they did have a bit of effort, but it wasn't that strong enough, the campaign.
So, all in all, it seems that Mr. Obama is trying to push for Najib to go for a more balanced way, a more balanced policy towards Asia, towards Malaysia, and also they expressed concern over Mr. Anwar's prosecution, because in any country, especially in Malaysia, we feel like there should be a healthy opposition in the country to pressure the government, make sure they're doing the job. If they crack down on the opposition, then it becomes more of this authoritarian kind of government, and none of us would want that, especially in this day, in this age, and we are supposed to be heading forward, not the other way around.
But it seems like he wants to crush the opposition, which I'm not sure whether it is a good campaign or not, but it's definitely not having a good branding or image towards Malaysia worldwide. Another area that is definitely getting more scrutiny is Indonesian politics. As we all know, the new line of cabinet has already been displayed. So one of the interesting cabinet is the first female foreign minister, Retno Marsudi. She is somehow something like Condoleezza Rice or Hillary Clinton when they were holding the position of Secretary of State. And what is interesting about Retno Marsudi, her foreign policy philosophy for the whole 5-year term under Jokowi would be 1,000 friends policy, no more under her, and she wants to have a pro-people policy. That is something unheard of in this region, to be very frank.
And this pro-people diplomacy, as she explained, should pave way for more economic opportunities, even for Indonesians abroad. And she wants to focus on exploring such opportunities for Indonesian diplomats stationed overseas who will be expected to perform this term called blusukan, a trademark activity of President Jokowi, which loosely translates to impromptu visits to the constituents by state officials.
So
and of course,
be careful. If you are messy enough, he might visit you without you noticing it, and you'll be in trouble.
Right. And she also, of course, stressed on the change of mindset, which was an emphasis from the start when Jokowi was campaigning. Even Farish Eno brought it up in his talk last week, that what they're trying to go for now is all about the mindset, because that's where it changes.
Mental revolusi, as being said in Malay or in Indonesian language. I like the word blusukan, which is a trademark
sound
of
like
Jokowi.
A good word though. But it is once you translate it and you know what it really means.
And it reminds me of, in high school or primary school, sometimes they would do spot check, like out of a sudden. It reminds me of that kind of scenario, like out of a sudden, hey, I'm going to, let's say, Kalimantan, doing some spot check on you guys. And then probably the governor there will be like, oh my god, what to do next? So the pro-people policy will be a huge shift from Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono's principle of 1,000 friends, 0 enemy. During Bambang's Yudhoyono's era, he wants to make friends with everyone. He doesn't care whether that friends have questionable policies or would harm the people of Indonesia in terms of development or not. But when it comes to Jokowi, he realized that in order for Indonesia to transit from a country that is developing to a developed nation, it has to uplift the livelihood of its people. And Indonesia is huge. There are people who are so poor that they don't have any place to live. They live on the street, and there are people who are so rich with this high inequality and more people wanting to invest in Indonesia. Definitely, they have to be a bit more picky and choosy.
And what's also important to note about this new policy is that it's expected to step up protection of Indonesians who are overseas, which is being overlooked at the moment. And of course, this is something that we really, not we need, that the Indonesians would really need, because
We don't need.
we know how they are often mistreated when they leave the country, when they go abroad, especially for job employment reasons, especially in Malaysia, sad to say, that their rights are always not protected. And hopefully with this new policy, they will follow through with it, and the Indonesians who are working abroad will have more of a systematic way to go about
more
protecting
rights,
their
in general. Because a lot of them, they travel all the way to Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and all these different countries. They are like us. They just want to seek a better life, to make money, and then to send their money to their family. And if their rights are not being protected, and if governments making diplomatic relations and economic relations just for the sake of development without realizing how the people are suffering, it will not be good for them in the long run. And definitely Indonesians are fed up with Malaysia for that. I mean, just one particular example. Another area that I want to highlight is we will be discussing more about issues on Southeast Asia later on at our BFTG Blast from the Grassroots. So stay tuned and listen to us at duranasian.com.